A pleasant Wednesday morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the press briefing of Presidential Spokesperson Secretary Edwin Lacerda and Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, Teresita Ging-Deles. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Marie. Good morning, Sec Ging. Yesterday, we just concluded the 27th formal exploratory talks between the government of the Philippines and the MILF. And so we have now in Kuala Lumpur, Dean Marvic Leonen and his panel. So we will be turning over to Dean Leonen, and he will be briefing us on what just concluded exploratory talks. And he will be also entertaining questions after his briefing. Dean Marvic Leonen, you may start.
Good afternoon to everybody. I am joined here by the entire panel of the Government of the Republic in talks with the MILF. To my right is Professor Ie Coronel Ferrer, and to her right is Dr. Hamid Bara. To my left is Undersecretary Yasmin Busranlao, and to her immediate left is former Secretary Senen Bacani. What I will do is I will read the statement that I read after we signed the agreement, and then I will enumerate the 10 points that was signed yesterday. Yesterday, we signed the document containing the decision points on principles with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. This marks a significant and concrete step forward by both parties in their discussions of substantive issues in these negotiations. For the GPH, this document is a preliminary listing of common points, which the parties have mutually identified coming from their respective initial positions. The MILF from their February 2011 revised comprehensive compact, and the GPH from its 341 August 2011 proposal. Those who choose to be cynical of the objective to attain peace in Mindanao by peaceful means have indeed freely remarked that the ongoing peace talks have not achieved much, especially with respect to the substantive issues at the core of the negotiations. Today, we dispel this cynicism. We have collated our points of mutual understanding, which have indeed significantly inspired both the substance and the direction of our discussions. Therefore, this document, too, is an insight to the depth and scope of issues encompassed by our discussions. As a preliminary listing, this document is not an exclusive statement of all common points which the parties may already share or which the parties may find consensus on in the future, nor is it intended as a detailed and precise statement of agreements. Rather, it should be read as a memorandum for the parties of the general directions of the substantive negotiations, described in broad strokes, generous enough to allow the parties the necessary space to navigate the details and context in a comprehensive final agreement. Through this document, the parties have taken the effort to articulate in language mutually acceptable to them the current extent of their consensus in the course of their long, difficult, and productive discussions on the substantive issues. It is a document evolved by the parties in their common attempt to check what they have achieved throughout the history of these peace talks and to lay down their ostensible points of agreement or common points. The parties agreed to put these points in writing to fix their positions in the current stage of negotiations, both recognizing that doing so can only help clarify various outstanding issues and more detailed questions that the parties still need to explore. In July 2010, when this panel was constituted by orders of the President to act as his emissary in the peace negotiations with the MILF, among his instructions to the panel were, 1, to consider the government's ability to deliver politically, economically, and socially commitments made and signed at the negotiating table, and 2, to continue sincere and open dialogues, not only with the MILF, but also with all sectors affected by the negotiating process. As far as the GPH is concerned, those common points are commitments that can be properly accommodated by our current legal and political realities. More importantly for the GPH, having these common points in writing and making it public are part of its sincere commitment to maintain transparency in these talks as far as practicable and to continue dialogues and consultations with affected sectors. Moreover, the Bangsamoro question is one that is properly posed not just to the national government, but quite importantly as well to the national public. Negotiations, after all, are about problem solving, and this document is an invitation for the public to take part in the process. For the GPH, engaging the public in this way is not only crucial for pragmatic and comprehensive discussions of the substantive issues, but also necessary for ensuring a final peace agreement in the future. which is both legitimate and politically viable. The June 2010 Declaration of Continuity signed by the GPH and the MILF, as clarified in the statement of my predecessor, GPH Chair Rafael Seguis, inspires the position of government in its steadfast commitment to maintain the continuity of negotiations embodied in agreed documents. The GPH recognizes that the status quo is not acceptable and thus continues to pursue reforms in this respect. The listing also addresses and settles a number of questions that have been raised about the Mindanao peace process. It is clear that what the parties are discussing are the parameters of meaningful autonomy for the Bangsamoro people under a new political entity that can replace the current ARMM created under Republic Act 9054. The autonomous political entity envisioned is a secular political unit existing within the Republic of the Philippines, located within its territory, and subject to its sovereignty as a state. The government of this autonomous political entity shall also ensure guarantees of human rights and liberties for its inhabitants, such as religious freedom, the right of women to meaningful political participation, and freedom from ethnic, religious, or sectarian harassment, in addition to rights already enjoyed. However, it is reasonably expected that the lists contained in this document, such as those for human rights guarantees and the powers reserved in the national government, cannot be deemed to be exclusive and does not preclude further points which may be agreed on as the parties continue to negotiate. This document is not the final peace agreement between the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. With the signing of this document, indeed, comes the mutual recognition of the parties that there are various outstanding issues that still requires further or more detailed discussion between the panels and more difficult decisions for their principals, such as issues pertaining to the geographic scope of the autonomous political entity, power sharing and wealth sharing between the entity and the national government, mechanisms for implementation of the agreement, and the contours of a transition and normalization process. The normalization process includes details on disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Such outstanding issues, as well as the points contained in this document, will be contextualized in a future final agreement. The GPH, as is our principal, His Excellency President Benigno Simeon Aquino III, remains sincerely committed to working towards a negotiated, comprehensive political settlement and with the MILF to address the Bangsamoro question. Today we move forward with a healthy amount of optimism tempered by prudence, recognizing the need now more than ever to be guided by lessons from the past and the needs of our people on the ground. We look forward to coming weeks of more thorough, perhaps more difficult conversations with the MILF and various affected sectors, with this understanding that only through peaceful and candid dialogues, open and public consultations, and continuous reflection can a sincere, effective, and acceptable solution be arrived at. Shukran and wasalam.
Thank you.
That ends.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, your first question will come from Joyce Pañares of Manila Standard.
Sir, good morning. Sir, curious lang kasi you signed the agreement for where both parties agreed to establish this Bangsamoro political entity. On the side of the government, have we done consultations on the possible areas that would be included in this entity, on whether the people are amenable to this, or have we gone that far, or are we going to do that pa lang?
Joyce, dalawang bahagi yung tanong mo. There are two parts of your question. But let me address the two parts first. There's a common point there. Yes, this government panel, along with the presidential advisor on the peace process, have conducted a lot of consultations. To date, ang bilang namin 66 consultations. 66 consultations with mayors, governors, even the ARMM governor, sometimes members of the House of Representatives, some members of the Senate, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Philippine National Police, civil society, various types of civil society, and on occasion, sometimes in informal discussions, even members of the media. So merong consultations that are ongoing. Okay, the first part. What we have agreed upon is that there should be an autonomous political entity. Yung sinasabi sa isang dyaryo na Bangsamoro State, I think is not accurate. what we have agreed, and we are on the same page with the MILF in discussing that there is an autonomous political entity. The contours of that autonomous political entity is still undergoing discussion, which means that yung kanyang hugis ay hindi pa masyadong nakikita. There are positions on both sides. You can expect, of course, that the GPH position is very closely hewed to its original 3-for-1 formula. But of course, that our position from there is not unmovable. The second point is yung territorial scope. At tulad ng sinabi ko, that is an outstanding issue. That is a very difficult issue to hurdle because as far as the government is concerned, we have a position in terms of the territorial scope. Of course, the MILF has a particular position, and I must share with you that they are poles apart. In other words, we still have to sit down and come to an understanding of the scope or the parameters of choosing the scope of the autonomous political entity. So ang short answer ko doon ay hindi pa, wala pa, at hindi nakalagay sa decision points on principle kung ano yung territorial scope.
But sir, in your, I'm not sure if it was in your statement or it was in the joint statement lang, parang na-mention that it would eventually parang replace ARMM. So is it parang, are we on the same page if na parang it would subsume the ARMM, this new entity? It would be like an expanded ARMM.
The proposal agreed upon by the parties is that the autonomous political entity will be in replacement of the ARM under Republic Act 9054, which to the point of view of government at present, which means that this is still being negotiated, will require a law. And which means therefore that we have engaged and are continually engaging Congress on this matter. The point is that the autonomous political entity should improve on the experiences of the past. Pag makita niyo ating statement, yung matagal na hong sinasabi, even by Secretary Lacerda, the status quo at the ARMM was not acceptable. Kaya kailangan improve yung situation doon.
Sir, last na lang, sorry. Sir, yung, when you say, sorry, how will this affect the elections in the ARMM next year? May discussions na ba on this? Because if you're going to replace it and if you're going to expand it, would it be better to postpone the elections then next year? Ganun na po ba yung discussions?
Nasa discussion stage pa lang yan. There are various options on the table. But definitely, if there is no agreement in due time, then therefore the elections in the ARMM will continue on the basis of Republic Act 10153 and Republic Act 9054. So sa ngayon, of course, tuloy yung election sa ARMM. Of course, on the table, ay maraming discussions in relation to what can be the form of the autonomous political entity, what transitory processes in order to put in place some of the newer institutions, if any, in the autonomous political entity.
GMA 7's Michael Fahatin.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Marvic Leonin. I just follow up on Joyce's question. Since may election na po nga doon sa ARMM, may point of convergence po eh. Siyempre, when they elect officials, that becomes a law. Yung term po nila and yung sinasabi niyo pong legislative laws needed to replace it. We have pretty much a time frame for it of 3 plus 4 plus 1 is 4 years. Ito po bang sinasabi niyo pong pagkakasundoan to replace the RMM, would this, as you see, fall within the scope of the term of the President Aquino?
We are hoping, of course, that we sign a final peace agreement within the term of the current administration. Our marching orders are to actually sign a peace agreement, implement it, and in fact, review its implementation. Hindi tulad po nung nangyari sa nakaraan na kung merong final peace agreement, yung susunod na administrasyon yung mag-i-implement. Kaya po, sa totoo ay ang pamahalaan natin ay humahabol din ho ng oras. We are after a time period. And you are correct. The parties are very fully aware of the time frames that are involved. But as I said, the agreement for now is that we are talking about an autonomous political entity within the Republic of the Philippines, within its territory, within its national sovereignty. And the contours and how it is actually put in place is still under discussion by the parties. Alam nyo, one reason why the GPH agreed to signing a set of preliminary points of principle would be to engage the public. At tulad nga ho ng nangyayari ngayon, kayo na mismo, nakikita nyo yung ilang points of discussion that may be being held at the negotiating table.
Sir, my second question would be, I'm sure this is a carefully worded statement, sir. May binanggit po kayo ito na secular political unit and subject to its sovereignty. Secular meaning, is this an all Muslim, including the indigenous people, the Tausugs and yung several Muslim groups in Mindanao, or the political entity can include non-Muslims, those prevalent Christian communities there? And when you say subject to sovereignty, is this in fact a statement acceding under the Philippine government and not a separate state anymore as they were wanting before?
It's not a separate state. And as far as the government is concerned, inseparability is part of our marching orders. Inseparability from the Republic of the Philippines. Pero kung balikan lang natin, the MILF has dropped its demand for independence at the negotiating table already. So ang pinag-uusapan natin dito is the relationship of the national government to the autonomous political entity. Secular, meaning to say that it is a government that encompasses all peoples within that particular area. But as you know, under our constitution, the justification for autonomy is that they have common historical, cultural, and social ties. So therefore, within that particular area, of course, those that believe in Islam are dominant. But on the other hand, that there are other peoples, other identities that are there. Merong mga indigenous peoples. There are peoples that subscribe to other religions also.
Sorry,
by the way, the 10 points include an agreement on the basic rights, an elaboration or an re-articulation or underscoring of some basic rights. That are recognized, which includes, among others, babasahin ko lang yung mga basic rights na nakalagay dito na importante, right to express political opinion and pursue democratically political aspirations, right to seek constitutional change by peaceful and legitimate means. May nakalagay din dito na right to equal opportunity and non-discrimination in social and economic activity and public service regardless of class, creed, disability, gender, or ethnicity.
Susugan ko po, Dean Marvic Leonin, yung sinasabi niyo pong rights. May nakalagay din po rito na right of the women to meaningful political participation. The word is political po. Yung political participation po, will that mean, not just allowing women to vote, but allowing women also to run for political office? And what kind of elections will that be? Is it a democratic, federal, or specific? Kung babalik po doon sa dati, is a parliamentary still yung hinihingi po nila?
Yung sa women, hinging po yung ating Presidential Advisor on Muslim Affairs na miyembro ho ng panel natin, si Undersecretary Yasmin Busranlao, para sagutin ko ano hong ibig sabihin ng meaningful political participation dito sa agreement na to.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Nung i-discuss namin po yung meaningful political participation, ang iniisip po natin ay hindi lang yung bumoboto sila. Ang iniisip natin is yung magkaroon sila ng puwang sa lahat ng levels ng decision making ng ating pamayanan. Nandun po yung kung sa barangay level, pwedeng sila itumakbo, pero pwede sila ay sumama sa mga local bodies, pwede po sila ay mag-organize, pwede po sila ay magkaroon ng posisyon sa lahat ng iba-ibang sangay ng gobyerno. So, hindi lang po bumoboto sila, kundi magkaroon talaga ng puwang at ma-influensya nila kung ano man yung mga batas at mga patakaran at pamamaraan ng pagpapalakad ng ating bayan.
Yung pong bang exercise na ito ay democratic pa rin po ba o parliamentary tulad po ng dating isinususog po ng MILF? Hingin
ko si Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer Galing po siya ng Policy Department ng University of the Philippines para sagutin po kayo.
So, makita naman natin dun sa 10-point agreement na may item doon that says that they i-acknowledge natin yung possibility na itong bagong autonomous political entity that will replace the arm can take the form of a ministerial system. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, of course, elected pa rin lahat, whether it's the executive body that will be created out of this from the elected members of the assembly. So kung chief minister yan, it's probably going to replace yung system na yon of the regional governor. And we've looked at the constitution, we've studied the provisions that are provided with reference to regional autonomy, and we believe that it can be accommodated within that framework of an elected legislature as well as an executive body.
So parliamentary po, ibig sabihin po ba ito ay hindi po sigurado sa ngayon pa kung parliamentary form or democratic?
Mali yata yung dichotomy natin. Kasi ang parliamentary is also democratic. Democratic means it's ruled by the people. Our constitution guarantees na kailangan palaging democratic. Ibig sabihin may election. Ibig sabihin elected yung parliament. Ibig sabihin mula doon sa regional assembly, pipili ng isang chief minister. Pero elected yung chief minister. So
Yes,
yung
sir.
dalawang side na yun elected. I think medyo i-correct lang natin yung impression na kapag one or the other, hindi democratic yung isa. Maraming forms of democracy.
Yes sir. Ang pinupunto ko po, yung dati po kasi sinususog po ng MILF is to have assemblymen basically. Not tapos sila po mag-e-elect ng parang prime minister or chief minister na sinasabi. Ganun pa rin po ba yung sinasabi ng MILF sa ngayon?
Oo. At saka ang sinasabi natin ay ito ay pwedeng ilagay sa isang republika at pinapayagan to natin ating constitution. And eventually, I think both sides, the MILF and the government, agree that whatever kind of law that is passed will undergo referendum in the area. Ngayon, kung tingin nila yun yung appropriate sa kanila, ay siguro naman ay boboto sila sa referendum and that will win the day. In other words, that is the setup that we have agreed upon.
Last na lang po, may sinabi rin po dito sa inyong decision points na the role of Sharia courts and Islamic principles. Sir, ito po ba ay sinasabing role, ibig sabihin soul mode po ba ito ng justice system? Or they can also come hand in hand or side by side with the normal civil criminal justice courts po now being practiced in the Philippines?
With the civil code inspired by the Spanish code na dominant sa ating national legal system, yes. Pero hingin ko si Dr. Hamid Bara, President ng National Ulama Council, at himself he has a doctorate in Islamic law, para ipaliwanag ko sa atin yung ibig sabihin ng Sharia.
Good afternoon to everyone. We have to understand that the Sharia legal system is one of the three world legal systems. We have the common law system or the Anglo-American legal system. We have the Roman law or the civil system. And all these three are being practiced in the Philippines. Our political law is basically American law. Our civil system is basically Roman law. And we have also Sharia law in the Philippines. And so therefore, the rule of Sharia in our system is to enrich our system of law. And so we are happy that with the Presidential Decree 1083 on the Code of Muslim Personal Laws, this is already accepted in the Philippines. And so therefore, when we say that the region will enhance the Sharia, it means that because the region will be majority Muslim, so they can enhance the rule of the Sharia, but still under our laws, we have to understand that we have only one legal system in the Philippines under the supervision of the Supreme Court, and whatever courts that will be created, this will still be under the single legal system of the Philippines. Thank you.
Salorina.
Hi sir, good afternoon po. Sir, you have mentioned na there should be this due time in order to sign a peace agreement. When will be that due time na sinasabi nyo?
I think ang sinabi ko dun sa opening statement dito sa 27th formal exploratory talks with due and deliberate speed. Malala natin na ang sinabi natin nung nakaraang taon, last year, that we said that 1 year is a reasonable time period for the parties to come to a fundamental agreement. We missed that by, I think, 24 days. Ibig sabihin, kung sinundan yung frame na yon, ay dapat noong March nagkapirmahan. But nagkapirmahan tayo ngayon in relation to these decision points. Ngayon, due time, siguro as soon as possible. Kasi po, kinakailangan na i-address itong the reasons or the root causes of this armed conflict as soon as possible so that the underdevelopment of that area as well as the development of our entire country can be aided by this peace process.
Sir, during the 26th formal exploratory talks, you have mentioned that parang yung time frame na tinitingnan ninyo is within the first half of the Aquino administration, and if no agreement will be signed, parang you will continue to talk with the MILF but you have to recraft the parang yung position paper natin. Ganun pa rin ba?
Thank you for informing the public about that time frame. Pero sa totoo lang, ang gusto namin sana at ang gusto ng administrasyon na ito is at the soonest possible time that there is a final agreement.
Pero sir, paano nga yung soonest possible time? Considering na you have admitted na marami pa kayong mga points of discussions na very vague as of this time, like yung sa geographical location na yun yung parang dating naging problema sa sa MOA AD.
Siyempre, these are negotiations. Kung minsan ang negotiations mabagal, kung minsan bibilis, kung minsan nakakakita ng common points, kung minsan nare-refrain. So, ibig sabihin, depende doon sa pag-uusap ng dalawang partido. Ngayon, mahirap po na, I think, to compel a negotiating panel to fix a time period. I think it's very difficult for us to be asked a public commitment as to a date when we will sign an agreement. Kasi kung yun po ang mangyayari, we are not sincere in the negotiations. Negotiations, we sit down and listen. At kahit gaano kahaba yung explanation, ay kailangan maintindihan namin saan nanggagaling ito, ano mga kadahilanan, etc. We would want it as quick as possible. But as we said, there are points that needs to be discussed. These are difficult points. Pag difficult to, hindi ibig sabihin vague. Ibig ko sabihin nito, kailangan lumalim tayo doon sa mga kadahilanan ng mga posisyon. Dapat maghanap tayo ng options kung paano ma-address yung iba't ibang kadahilanan. Dapat bumalik ko tayo sa principles para pag-usapan yon. Negotiations are involved. It's a political negotiations, kaya kailangan palaging bumabalik sa principle natin.
Sir, regarding dun sa power sharing and wealth sharing, do you have, or are you at liberty to tell us kung ano yung proposal ng government? Paano yung power sharing and wealth sharing?
No, I'm not at liberty to say because these are offers and counter-offers. These are tentative discussions. And when we put it out in public without context, ay pwedeng ma-misinterpret, makakagambala dun sa negotiations. But as we said, we are consulting with the proper sectors, which means local governments, which means cabinet secretaries, which means the president. We're engaging some senators, we're engaging some members of the House of Representatives. At kapag meron na, tulad nito, decision points on principles, I think ang nangyayari ay gustong ilabas sa publiko para magkaroon ng konting discussion on what has been decided upon. But siguro, isipin ng publiko, baka kung may suggestions sila, then they can come out freely with these particular suggestions on power sharing.
Sir, last question. How will this new autonomous political entity differ with the Bangsamoro juridical entity that was proposed before?
We are fully aware of what the public's objection was with respect to the Bangsamoro juridical entity. Kaya ang sinasabi lang namin itong autonomous political entity, the contours are still being discussed by the two panels. And as far as the GPH is concerned, we're guided by many things. The flexibilities of the Constitution, the history of these negotiations, which include what happened with the Bangsamoro juridical entity. We are also guided by the Supreme Court decision deciding on the MOA AD, as well as many other factors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Celerina. Bombo Raymond. Willard, hindi ka na.
Yes, sir. Sir, I would just like to press on Celerina's question kasi it's not from the media na sa ngayong taon expected na malagdaan yung final peace agreement. It is from eventually Secretary Diging Delis who is here. Yung nag-mention noon na hopefully within this year malagdaan yung final peace agreement.
Akong level ng hope, sana itong buwan na to, napirmahan na. Sana next month, sana month after, sana itong taon na to. Sana within the first half of this administration.
Thank
So sa amin, we keep on pushing that it is possible to sign a final peace agreement soon. The
Sir.
conditions in that area, all of us know. And therefore, this is something that is urgent and very important.
Sir, have you ever discussed yung concerns dun sa paglalabas ng statements ng MILF? Like for example, last week, before you go with this peace talks on Kuala Lumpur, as Vice Chairman for Political Affairs, Gadisali Jafar, mentioned na they doubt the sincerity of the government negotiators. So, have you resolved this na they should have to bring those statements in the negotiating table rather than on media?
The Vice Chair Jafar is not a member of their negotiating panel. We deal directly with the negotiating panel. As far as the negotiating panel is concerned, again, during these talks, this round of talks, they emphasize that they have trust in the President's sincerity. Yun ang naririnig namin diretso. So we do not rely on the statements made through a person reported in the media as to attributed to the Vice Chair of the MILF. At saka siguro isipin din natin that everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but as far as the negotiating panel is concerned, we have to listen to our counterparts rather than to public pronouncements. Ngayon, it is essential in terms of political negotiations that there are these public discussions. Kaya hindi naman masama siguro na maraming mag-express ng kanilang sariling opinion. We are expecting that there can be opposition to what it is that we sign, and that's part of the reality of a democratic political setup.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bombo Raymond. Next question from Weng de la Fuente of Net25.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, where would this put the MNLF? Kasi yung pong peace agreement, 1986 peace agreement created the autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao.
In 1986, nagkaroon ho tayo ng constitutional exercise. Tapos nabuo ho doon yung konsepto sa Article 10 ng autonomous area. Hindi ho produkto yon ng negotiation. Noong 1987, na-ratify po yung ating constitution. Baka ang sinasabi natin yung 1996 final peace agreement ng MNLF. So, pwede ba i-clarify ho lang natin kung ano ibig natin sabihin?
Kasi po, di ba, part of the negotiations before para makabuo ng isang agreement sa MNLF ay yung giniit din po nila na magkaroon ng autonomous region for the Muslim Mindanao. So, kung papalawakin po natin siya, are we also in consultation with the MNLF? Kasi baka magtampo naman po sila sa government ngayon.
Hindi naman siguro pagtatampo. These are very grave political positions of both movements, yung dating MNLF at saka yung Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And my brief answer is yes, that there are consultations. In fact, there is another table. Meron nung pag-uusap kaugnay ng implementation ng final peace agreement. And perhaps Secretary Deles can clarify more on these issues.
Sir, meron din po ba tayong ipupush na provisions dun sa, in any case na dito sa pagbuo ng political entity, na ang MILF would also be given position doon sa itatayong autonomous region?
Of course, that the MILF is looking at the empowerment of the Bangsamoro. Of course, marami hong forms ang kanilang proposal. So hanggang doon na lang muna ako.
Thank you, sir.
I think there are no more questions. Yeah, we have one more. One more from Joyce Pañares.
Sir, pwedeng pa-enlighten lang kung magkakapirmahan po this year, how would that push back the ARMM elections? And kung sakali, ano ang reasonable period para masabi natin na pwede na mag-start yung transition? Are we looking at, say, third quarter, fourth quarter as a period na kung magkapirmahan, then we can postpone the elections and proceed towards the transition period?
Dapat choice nasa negotiating panel ka kasi pinag-uusapan pa yan eh. So wala pa akong masabi tungkol sa resulta na yan. So as I said, in negotiations, meron hong offers and counter offers. Nandun pa lang ho kami, binubuo namin yung mga pag-uusap. Can I ask, siguro Secretary Bacani can shed light more on the nature of negotiations.
Actually, negotiations are never easy. Kanya usually merong offer at saka counter-offer. Especially pag pinag-uusapan na yung mga transition mechanisms, yan ang mga mahirap pag-usapan. That's why we'd rather not discuss a lot more detail on this right now because these are part of the serious outstanding issues being negotiated by both panels.
Sir, sorry, I asked that question because you said a while ago that if there is no agreement in due time, tuloy ang elections. That gives the impression that if there is an agreement, the election would be pushed back.
There are many options, various options that are being discussed on the table, which can include also that the elections will continue in 2013. Ang sinasabi ko lang, kapag walang agreement, di syempre, the current law prescribes for elections in the regional government in 2013. So that's the option that will happen because there is no final peace agreement. With the final peace agreement, hindi pa natin alam, binubuo pa yan. May current position ng government dito, may position ng MILF dito, at alam nyo na sa negotiation, meron yung mga ganitong pag-uusap. Ano kaya kung ganito? Anong tingin nyo rito? And that's very tentative. So we cannot proceed and inform the public on what are the various options on the table.
Celerina?
Sir, sorry. You have mentioned na as soon as possible dapat may peace agreement. Pero sir, alin ba yung pinaka-crucial time na we need to sign a final peace agreement? Like, should it be before the election nga or this year or what?
Sana bukas. Ang point namin is that as soon as possible, that we should sign a final peace agreement. You know, an agreement will take into consideration the realities that are present. The realities that are present. It will also take into consideration the timelines of political exercises. Kaya kung sakaling merong nagpipintong election sa 2013 o meron nang mangyayari sa 2016, these are natural timelines which are considered in the negotiations. Kaya sinasabi natin, these are political negotiations taking place, not in a vacuum, but within a political reality. Kaya kinoconsider ho lahat yan. Pero sa government side, we are pushing at the earliest possible time.
Pero sir, are you pressured na there should be an agreement before the election next year?
We are pressured to have an agreement because of the conditions in the area. We are pressured because we know that many people have died in this armed conflict for reasons that we can address on a negotiating table. We are not pressured because of peace. Si Professor EMA, dagdag.
Ito rin siguro yung dapat makita. The final peace agreement, a peace agreement that will be signed will not automatically suspend the arm or suspend the election. So ibig sabihin, maski magkapirmahan tayo bukas, marami pang requirements yan para ma-put in place. For instance, we will need to generate support from Congress, from both the Senate and the House, to actually pass the law that will make it possible for some kind of an implementing mechanisms to take place. No? So ang punto lang dito, the longer the negotiation takes, mas magsiset in yung normal timetable, yung political timetable, which means the 2013, andyan yung scheduled election, 2016, magkakaroon na tayo ng bagong presidential election. And if all these steps are not done early enough, then the normal timetable will happen. So, pag nagkapirmahan ka, hindi kagad mai-implement yon. Maraming legislative requirements yan. And that's why we're working closely with Congress, we're working closely with the public so that they will be able to support all the requirements that will make it, that will implement the elements of the agreement.
Ano ka? Okay, no more questions for the team, for the panel? Okay, no more questions, Secretary. May we call Presidential Advisor in the Peace Process, Teresita Guingdeles?
Yeah, siguro just to say that just because things cannot be said yet or because there has been no agreement doesn't mean that it's vague. I think at this point we have a pretty good idea already of what they're saying, and they have a pretty good idea of what we're saying. And that therefore the negotiations are tough. They're serious. It doesn't mean it's vague. It doesn't mean we have no idea about what may or may not happen. That's there, but it cannot be announced yet because precisely these proposals and counter proposals are still happening. So it is both the possibility of how soon that will be. It could actually be soon, depending on whether the common grounds that are found between what may be distant proposals suddenly become acceptable pala. Pwede naman pala. It could happen soon, but maybe not. It might take some more time. For us, syempre, the sooner, the better, because so much needs to be done. As sinabi nga, hindi automatic magpirmahan that our agreement will automatically implement itself. And because there is a time frame, which is the president does not want to sign something that will be unfinished business for the next administration to follow. The more time we have to make sure that what is signed is implemented, the better for us. So I hope that helps to clarify where we are. We hope that this initial summary of decision points helps to show people that it is not that nothing's happening on the table. In fact, there are very hard things that are already happening there. We hope it starts more conversations, and I think that will be how it will be going. And we continue to ask for people's support. We continue to ask for people's contributions and inputs. It is very important that at the end of the day, that whatever is signed has broad support from the public. Thank you.
Ma'am, a question from Celerina.
Ma'am, would you consider the failed era, I don't know if it's failed ARMM, as one of those reasons why you find it difficult to sign a peace agreement with the MILF?
Well, when there are more things to fix, it's harder. And when there are realities on the ground, syempre, it's harder because those things have to be considered. It's not like we're negotiating in a vacuum. It's not like we're negotiating that nothing is there, no reality is there. So, pag sasabihin mong may transition, what you're moving from is the present reality. And that means a transition, depending on that present reality, will either be easier or harder depending on where that is. And if everyone agrees now, and I think everyone agrees now, that what the present the political arrangement that had happened is not acceptable. Certainly, it is part of what we need to, as government especially, need to always consider, because we cannot move as if there were no existing laws, as if there were no existing officials, as if there were no existing things that need to be fixing.
So ma'am, kung naging maayos lang sana before, hindi ganito kahirap?
Well, kung naging maayos before, baka hindi na nga kailangan, baka nga natapos na. Pero ang isa rin kasing tinitignan, pagbabalikan yung batas, marami talagang nandun na hindi na-implementa. I mean, hindi sinasabi yung batas itself was a complete, has to be thrown away. There are many things in the law that, in fact, if they had been implemented, might have resolved some of the issues, some of the problems that we're facing now. But the reality is they were not. should some of these that are in the present law find its way into a new political arrangement, we're not saying everything needs to change, but some things may need to change to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you.